This is so weird. This is my first ever YouTube video. Welcome to my apartment. Welcome to my little nook. I love books so much, so I just want I don't know. Hello, welcome. I love books. I watch a lot of BookTube, and I thought I might as well jump on the bandwagon and talk about some books. Big lover of classics, history, dystopian, anything weird, I'm into it. And so I wanted to film a little book haul. I bought a ton of books. She heavy. Newberry Library book sale apparently is a huge book sale that happens in Chicago every year. I live in Chicago, by the way. Past couple years, they haven't been able to do it because of COVID, but this year was the first year it opened back up. The Newberry Library downtown. My siblings were visiting, and I dragged them there, and it was amazing. Like books on books on books on books. I was, I've been to book sales before at libraries, and I was considering it was just going to be a little thing, but I forgot how gigantic the Newberry Library is, and it was huge. I got a little carried away. I was like, we'll get a couple books. I got very carried away because a lot of the books were $5 and under. A lot of these I'd been looking for quite a bit, and some I was not expecting to see there at all and decided to pick them up, but that's what happens when you love classics. You usually find books that people don't want, and they're usually, because they're in such mass circulation and they often have no copyright on them anymore, you can find them for literally dirt cheap. So I never pay full price for a classic. So I'm just gonna go through each book I got, I guess. A lot of these books have been on my list for a long time, but I don't know much about a lot of them. So this isn't going to be a very in-depth video about, what these books are about and why you should read them. It's mostly just like what has attracted me to these books, why I've been interested, and yeah, we'll get into it. We'll also say some of these are kind of like deep dive classics as well, because I have read a lot of classics at this point. We're starting this YouTube journey. This is me like well within reading, like I've read Character in the Rye, I've read Great Gatsby, I've read all the Austens at this point. Like I've really progressed. So this is me trying to find now. I might go back and reread some of those classics, but also I'm really trying to find like the real hidden gems and like really dig deep to find like some really great novels, plays, essays, collections, nonfiction that's considered classics but maybe aren't as well known, because I've just read a lot of them at this point. So I feel like we gotta keep exploring. We gotta go into the depths, because there's a lot out there. So I am very excited to show these off. Again, these were so cheap. They were so cheap, and there were so many of them, and I couldn't believe that people hadn't taken some of these. I was like, how did you pass this up? So the first one I got, I think this was the first one that I picked up when I was there, because the title just really jumped out at me. It's Anthony Trollope's Can You Forgive Her? Which is such an insane title to me, because I feel like a lot of Victorian novels, that's kind of at the base of the novel. Like, it's always about some woman who's done something egregious for her time, and then the author's like, but can you forgive her? And you, and maybe Victorian society, nicer Victorian society then would have been like, oh, you could never forgive her. The 21st century woman's like, yeah, you know what? I could probably forgive her for whatever she did in this book. So I don't know why. I think the title is so stark. I've never read any Anthony Trollope before. I really don't know much about him. I know this is the first of the Palliser novels. He wrote maybe like 4 or 5 of these books. This is the first one in the series. I picked this up though thinking that it was going to be the first of the Chronicles of Barsetshire. Chronicles of Barsetshire? I thought it was going to be the first one of that. They were not. Apparently he wrote 2 different series, they're loose series. It's not like, I know with the Chronicles of Barsetshire, they say you should kind of read them in order, because the plot is linear in them. They use the same characters, lots of characters. But with the Palliser novels, I don't know if you have to read them in order. But if I ever get into a series, which is rare, I'm not really a series person, but if I get into a series, I usually like to start from the very beginning because that's how the author wrote them. But I've never read any Trollope. I have never really come across him, but I really haven't seen that many people talk about his stuff. I don't know much about it. So I'm excited to pick this one up. Don't know when I will. Also, I love the art on here. Like, it's so intense. And then I think the title of this is called Yes. Yes to what? Like, yes, they're gonna have an affair. Yes, they're gonna get married. Like, this is an intense cover. So that's also what attracted me to it. I was like, oh, something is definitely going to happen. I'm gonna guess there's an affair, which is why it's called Can You Forgive Her? So I'm excited. Trollope, we're gonna pick that up at some point. Next is one I've had on my list for a really long time. It is Daniel Durandez. Daniel Deronda by George Eliot. I read first and only George Eliot I've read actually was a long time ago. It was probably in high school or early college. I read The Mill and the Floss, which I don't know what it was about that book because that's also one I haven't heard too many people talk about. But I read Mill and the Floss and it just made me sob. I don't know what it was. But basically I read Mill and the Floss and just at the end just sobbed. That book kind of has one of the worst endings of all time. It's like agreed upon. It's kind of one of the worst endings of any Victorian novel because it was sort of like a deus ex machina. Like, it was almost as though George Eliot was writing these characters and their problems and she didn't know how to get them out of it, so she just like wrote this ending, which I won't spoil it, but you're left kind of like, are you you're serious, George? So I think I was so devastated it turned me off to George Eliot for a really long time. And also, I remember her paragraphs being very long. I have Silas Marner, and I've had a beautiful Penguin cloth-bound copy of Middlemarch forever. I got it for Christmas one year, and it looks beautiful. Like, I have it kind of like displayed in my living room. It like looks really nice, but I'm a poser. I have not read it yet. I might just get, because it's such a nice copy, I might just get like a crappier copy of Middlemarch. So I keep acquiring George Eliot books, and I haven't read them. I remember passing this one a lot when I would go more to Barnes & Noble when I was growing up and being like, what is Daniel Deronda? Who is he? Who is Daniel? I also love the cover of this. I love these old Penguin English library, like these old 70s copies with the orange spine. They always, like, they're exactly what you want and nothing more. Like, it's literally like, here's a perfect size of this big book. The orange spine is iconic. It smells good. It smells so good. And it just feels very, like, comfortable. And that's why I like these books too. Someone has, hopefully, unless they donated it because they hated it, they loved this book and treasured it and took it around with them. The spine is cracked. I can't stop smelling. This is just gonna be a video of me smelling the book. But of what I know about this, it was her last novel. It was a little bit different for the time because she wrote about British Jews during the late 19th century, and I think that's fascinating because I have never read, I don't think I've read anything about Jewish people in England at that time, so I really have no insight or no historical context for what that might have been like for them at that time. I don't know if George Eliot, I'd have to do research. I don't know if how well she knew the Jewish population, if this might just be like her impressions, or she was close to people who were. Daniel Deronda. Also, she looks like Stregonona. I think it's supposed to be George Eliot. Stregonona! Okay, anyway, our next book is Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. Found this copy. I've been looking for this book for a bit, every time I saw it, and this happens to me all the time with classics, I like will find one for like $5, but then I'm like, no, there's got to be a cheaper copy. Like, I know somewhere someone is selling a $1 copy of Ivanhoe, and sure enough, I found it. I just knew that this is such a widespread classic. It's been around forever. It's a teacher's edition. It's originally $2.50, and in the middle of the book, it has like a teaching guide on how to teach this book from whenever this book was published. So, 63. So if you were a teacher in 1963 and you had to teach Ivanhoe, this is it. Suggestions for motivating the reading. How do you get kids to read? But yeah, Ivanhoe. Of what I know, it is kind of the book that popularized a lot of historical figures from the time that kind of became mythic people of the time. So like this popularized Robin Hood, Little John, King Little John. That's what he's called in the Disney movie. The bear, you know, the bear guy. Yeah, that one. It was written, first edition 1820. Yeah, so this is an old classic. And it's written in kind of Old English as well, which I'm always up whenever something's written in dialect or written in Old English. I'm always down for the challenge. I just read Train Spotting by Irvin Welsh, which I had forgotten. I opened the book and went, oh crap, it's in Scottish dialect. But once you got into the first chapter or two and you got into the rhythm, it was so satisfying because you could hear them speaking that way. But it had just been a long time since I read anything in dialect. This is just in Old English, which I think will be really fun because I haven't really read anything in Old English. I know I want to get to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, because Dev Patel was in the movie, and but I will read that at some point. Those lines, like the writing, it just seems so cool. It gets you really into the world of Middle Ages England. So love it. I saw this and I was like, oh, if it's a teaching edition, maybe it's not in, it might not be a full, complete text, but not to worry. Complete and unabridged. We'll get to Ivanhoe at some point. My problem is I hoard books, so I have way too many that are kind of waiting to be read. So we'll see when we get to these. Then we have, on the kind of Middle Ages streak, I got The Waning of the Middle Ages by Huizinga. I think it's actually John Huizinga. Yes, John Huizinga. He's a Dutch writer. I picked this up. This was kind of the first book I picked up when I was in the library sale. Just because the title alone, I was like, yes, The Waning of the Middle Ages. I don't necessarily want to know about like the throes of the Middle Ages or like right in the middle of it. I want to know like what kind of led to the downfall of it. The Middle Ages was not something in high school we really focused on. We focused a lot in history on pretty much any other continent, but Europe, which I liked. We didn't focus on European history at all, but I was always kind of interested in it. And currently a topic that I'm like kind of obsessed with is the plague. But gee, I wonder why in the year of our Lord 2022, why would I be interested in the plague? But I just find it on every level just so fascinating. The spread of the disease, the sociological implications of it, how it affected the whole culture and the continent and the population. And it's not something I really learned about, so I'm like, I just have an interest in it because it's a topic I never really covered. I saw this and I was like, oh, The Waning of the Middle Ages. Like, also like the cover, like these guys just look miserable. They look so miserable, but I love them. I looked it up. I'm like, what even is this book? I just kind of picked it up on a whim. It was $1. I'm like, let's see. Apparently it's like a kind of a classic of its genre, like of Middle Ages writing. This was written in the 20s. I don't usually read history books about topics when that book was published kind of a while ago. And I don't know, I mean, anyone who reads more history or might be a historian can chime in, but I just don't know if like, maybe we know more now, so we should only really be reading more recent historical reads, or there's some like classics or like history books that are deemed classics that still are an authority on the subject, because at the end of the day, the history happened, right? Like there's nothing changing the fact that the Middle Ages ended and then gave way to the Renaissance. Like that's undisputed fact. But is it that we, in more recent books, more stuff has come to light so we can better talk about the history then? History also is about analyzing what happened and interpreting what happened in the past and comparing it to different time periods. So is it that, you know, a book written about maybe the waning of the Middle Ages now would discuss something different, or like analyze what they know about the Middle Ages differently now than they would back in the 1920s? Is it worth reading about the Middle Ages in every decade of the 20th century? Maybe, I don't know. I'm not an authority on the subject at all. I think it's just interesting anyway. And I know kind of the thesis statement of this book is that, you know, the Middle Ages was super hyper-focused, especially in court life, the kind of upper classes living away in these castles, kind of super hyper-focused on these stories of chivalry, on living kind of opulently. And it was all sort of a coping mechanism for the fact that conditions in this time were abysmal. There was so much disease, feudalism, there was just terrible things going on. So they kind of had their coping mechanism, these people, especially in court life, was to overcompensate and be so like chivalrous and so into the beauty of things when life was actually, people were dying because of rat fleas. And again, I don't know much about it. Really don't know much about the Middle Ages. I don't know, so I'm excited to pick this one up. It's a nice beach read. I'm sure I'll pick it up at some point. Excuse me. Next is Tom Jones by Henry Fielding, which the full title I didn't know about. If I could find it. The History of Tom Jones, a Foundling, in 6 volumes by Henry Fielding, Esquire, London. It's got one of these classic, like, 18th century kind of title pages. Again, don't know much about this book. Of what I know about it, it's kind of one of those classic English novels where it's about, like, one guy growing up and, like, he's kind of a scoundrel, watch out, but, like, he's also incredible for his time. Kind of like a David Copperfield, like, what else am I thinking of? Like, one of those where it's like the guy is so spectacular and he's like kind of a rogue. He's kind of like getting into trouble, but he's also like, it's doing great. It's picaresque, that's it. It's a picaresque novel. I always like those every so often. I'm like, let's just like follow one guy around for his whole life and just see what kind of shenanigans he gets up to. So that's what I know this book is about. It's called The Adventures or the History of Tom Jones, a Foundling. That tells me he was born an orphan and he kind of goes from rags to riches, which I feel like maybe these were more popular back in the 18th century, because Moll Flanders is a very similar type of story where it's instead of focusing on like some crazy guy, it's like this woman, she was born in Newgate Prison and then she turns herself around. But this is considered like one of the first what we now consider like the modern novel. And I know that there's like a ton of books that really do claim that, but this also is kind of part of that. So it's good. I'm excited. Don't know when I'll get to this. Again, this is just one of those, I don't have a big book fear. I read big books a lot, but it's just like I have to space them out at a certain time. I'm in some book clubs, so I have to make sure I prioritize the book club reads. And then, well, it's like, when do I get to this? I don't know. Again, it's a Penguin classic. It's an older Penguin classic, but it's got the black spine. And again, notes of decay. We love that. Okay, so that is Tom Jones. Next one is a Russian classic. I have not read a Russian classic in eons. I have not read a Russian classic, I think I wrote it down actually, like when the last time I read one. Brothers Karamazov. I always want to say Karamazov? I'm gonna go with Karamazov. I read that one back in 2020 and loved it. 2020 was my year that I read like some really difficult reads because I had all the time in the world. Read it, loved it, but then didn't touch a Russian classic for years. I still haven't read one yet, but I have a ton that are on my list. So I found this one for $1, a humble $1. Pushkin's Eugene Onegin, sorry. Eugene Oneill. This is a novel written in verse, which I can't remember the last time, if ever, I've read a novel in verse. But I'm very excited to pick this one up because people love this one. A YouTube channel that I love is Carolyn Marie Reads. If you're here, you probably have seen her stuff because she's a big classics person. And she read this book and absolutely loved it. So I was like, well, I'm gonna add it to the TBR, obviously. Again, a little nervous it's in verse. I feel like I won't, because I like poetry, but I'll read a poem here and there and like it, but I don't think I've ever read like a poetry volume as though I'm reading a novel, like read it all the way through. So I'm curious. I'm curious if I'll like it, but apparently it's supposed to be amazing. This was written in, so the early 19th century. Again, I don't know much about it. I think it might just be about this guy. It's just about Eugene, just hanging out. I am very excited to get to this one. I think I will enjoy it. A novel in verse. The first Russian classic I read was Dr. Zhivago. Dr. Zhivago. I read Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak a long time ago, but it was the first time, I think I was in high school when I was a little ambitious, and I didn't understand the Russian naming system. If you're new to it, it can throw you off a little bit because I was very confused by the kind of middle name system, which I'm going to butcher what it's actually called, so I'm not going to say it. But basically, when someone takes on their father's name, I was so confused. I was like, why do they have two last names? Why are they being referred to with just the middle name and then the last name? And then not to mention the Russians love nicknames. I was so confused. So I didn't like that book as much as I think I actually would really love it now. It was not until I read Anna Karenina later in high school, when I was a little bit older, that I was like, oh, it's all the same person. They just have like 10 names. Then I was into it. And then I loved Anna Karenina, and then that set me on the Russian classics path. I'm actually very excited to get to this. Yeah, Pushkin. Good times. And then I found this really cool copy of The Caine Mutiny by Henry Wook. What? I don't know. But it's The Caine Mutiny. This I just thought was such a cool book because I know it's about mutiny on a boat, and for some reason this just looks to me like you would find it on an old boat. You go into the captain's quarters and he's got like all these old like volumes that are all dusty, and he has The Caine Mutiny. How much was this one? It was $5. This was probably the most expensive one I got. The spine is a little bit messed up, but I'm literally just gonna take some glue and just put that over. But this to me just looked like such a nautical copy of this book, and it just, even though this is not a 19th century novel, this is more of a more modern classic. So I think there's something happening outside. The Caine Mutiny. Pretty self-explanatory title. It's about a ship in the Pacific during World War II, and there is a mutiny. I think it's a non-violent mutiny, but essentially it's the captain gets overthrown by his crew, and it's sort of about the moral implications of World War II. Like, how often are you following orders? When can you kind of dissent in times of war, and when your commander is making you do maybe morally questionable things, which I think was probably something people were grappling with coming home from World War II quite a bit, which is why I think this book really did strike a chord with people. And it did win the Pulitzer Prize. To me, I'm like, Pulitzer Prize winners, they're either completely forgotten and you're like, I wouldn't have known this was a Pulitzer Prize, or they become classics. So, this is one that I don't know if anybody's talking about this book, reading this book. I just think it's interesting. I love the idea of there being mutiny. I love mutiny. Mutiny. Also just love nautical books. I don't know why. I just love when things take place on a ship. Yo ho. I love Moby Dick. And that was very nautical, like very nautical. There's like the chorus of sailors, and it was obviously the whole thing takes place on the seas. And that just kind of got me interested in like, oh, like seafaring stories and seafaring books. I'm actually quite excited to get to this one. This might be like a good fall. Again, like for some reason boats make me think of fall, like crisp fall air, even though I don't know if that's when you go sailing, but this might be a good fall read, so I think that's when I will pick this up. But she's so pretty. Caine Mutiny. Then we have the second to last book here, which is a book I was like, oh, I would never expect that this would be here, because I've been looking for this book, thinking it's got to be, you know, at a thrift store or a used bookstore, like it's got to be somewhere, and haven't been able to find it. And then the spine just like jumped out at me from like just a couple people in front of me, and then I was like, you, and the book went, you. And it was A Good Scent from a Strange Mountain by Robert Olen Butler. First of all, the title. Like, it's such a good title. A Good Scent from a Strange Mountain. Like, what is that? Like, what is the good scent? And from a strange mountain. It's about these Vietnamese Americans living in specifically Louisiana in the South after the Vietnam War. I'm going to guess they're not treated very well. It's all short stories about these people. Are they interconnected? Are the characters connected? I'm not sure. I just think that that's a really interesting concept, that it's specifically about Vietnamese immigrants living in the US, in Louisiana, after the Vietnam War. What could go wrong? Yeah, no. So I think this would be super interesting. I want to read more about literature about the Vietnam War, both during and post. We read in high school the things they carried, and I loved it. I'm not like super into books about war, until I am. I remember we were going to read it in class, and I was like, okay, fine, like another war book, let's go. But I was like, oh my god, this is so good. If you've read Sweetheart of the Song Trombone, you know what I mean. It's so good. I have not read much else about the Vietnam War since that book, and I'm just very, again, amazing title. It's a little dirty, but very excited to get to this. I think this will be very good, and this is one that I think I could just pick up and get through pretty quickly. It's only $269. Also won the Pulitzer, I think in 1993. Yeah, 1993, won the Pulitzer. I do want to read all the Pulitzers. I think that's a mission of mine. Is it a classic? I think maybe more of a modern classic. A classic maybe in terms of the short story canon, maybe. Or it's not a classic and I'm just gonna read it. Because I don't just read classics. I do try to expand my horizons. The last one is not considered a classic, but I read the premise of this book and was like, oh, I really want to read this. And I found it, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, Metropolitan Stories, Kristen Coulson. Metropolitan Stories, Kristen Coulson. And it's a nice little, I love the size of it. It's a little hardback. It's got the jacket on it still. It's in pristine condition. And it's $3. Gotta love, go to your library and see if they're selling their books. Oh, right, and I forgot, it's a signed copy. Christine! It was just published. I mean, this came out in 2019, I want to say, 2020. It's a very recent book. Yeah, 2019. And it's kind of like short stories, little vignettes, about all things at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. So it's about the people who work there, you know, the security guards, the people working in the cafe, you know, just all these like people that you don't necessarily notice are working at the museum when you go. And it's about their interaction with the art and just like how the whole organization kind of breathes and lives. And I don't know if she still does, but she worked for a long time at the Met, so she really like knows this place inside and out. I am a huge art history nerd. I'm always trying to find like good books about certain art movements, like surrealism or expressionism. I almost said imperialism. You know that art movement? Impressionism. So I'm always trying to find books that are sort of about movements or about artists' lives. If you want a really wild read, read Paul Gauguin's Wikipedia page. I swear to God, it's insane. He just had a crazy life. So I'm trying to find a good biography on him because he just was off the wall. So I love reading about art. I just think it's fascinating. And so this I had to pick up because I grew up going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art with my mom when I was a kid, because I'm from New Jersey. So we'd go into New York and we'd go to the museum. And I remember as a kid being like, okay, this is kind of boring. I've been to the MoMA more recently, which I love, but I've not been to the Met in a long time. So this, I think, I will want to read this, and then when I'm in New York again, which will probably be soon, I will go again, because it's just a very interesting space. It has some of the best art in the world, and of course I want to know the people who work there and what it's like to like kind of be in that space, not as a patron, but as someone who knows it more intimately. And also the cover is so beautiful. I don't know, let me see if I can guess the time period. The sleeves, the silhouette, I'm gonna guess it's the 1840s. Ooh, I was close. It's called Susan Walker Morse, in parentheses, The Muse. And this was made circa 1836-37. Oh, I was close. Those sleeves, look at 1840s. Metropolitan stories. I think this will be just a very quick little nice read. Maybe like you can like read one of these with my coffee in the morning before going to work. I think I'd like that. So there we are. Well, that's it. It's a lot. Honestly, I went way too overboard. I got way too many books because I have so many books that are like giving me the stink eye right now, being like, why haven't you read? And I just keep buying books. I mean, like, they were $1. And I just got way carried away. Here they are. Thank you so much for watching. You can subscribe if you want. This is my very first video, so I will not hold it against you if you don't subscribe. But subscribe, because I'll make more videos. If you feel inclined to comment, let me know how you think I did. Tell me if I have something in my teeth. Let me know what you'd like to see. I don't know. But other than that, I think that's it for me. Bye.